Это un manicomio! Вы хотите меня видеть? Да. Идите в спортивное, рабочее видите, и принесите мне Avenge me! Avenge me! The boys! Don't cry! Hold it back!
All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid. Keeps me warm.
Well, blindfolds, as violent as your neo-convention. I never heard of it.
Is in bloom, transmissions will resume. I try to push, try to keep us all down, hope that we will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, another package like to keep us trapped in greed. All green belts wrapped around our minds, and endless red tape to keep the truth confined.
12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to uftreadonme.com. Tonight we have special guest Smiter on,
Hello.
Regular guest to the website. Thanks for coming on, man. I know, Dave, you have a couple things you'd like to throw out there for everybody, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Armory with Fox on You Have Tread on Me Radio Network. We're also simulcasting on ICRN over in the UK and United We Strike Radio. So welcome all listeners. If you want to participate in our chat room, you can go to youhavetreadonme.com/radio and get involved with the online chat so you can interact with us on this. We have some good programs coming up. Tomorrow we have Sleepy Salsa on. We're going to be talking about balkanization and division amongst the Patriot community. And on Monday we're going to have Doc on for another edition of Militia Medic. And on Cinco de Mayo, we've got a Cinco de Mayo special with Rock Dog. So please tune in for all of that. I think tonight we're going to be talking some more asymmetric warfare, guerrilla warfare tactics, and our intention on this is preparedness, preparing for the worst case scenario. Right now, we're facing some unique situations in the world. We've got our military so spread thin on all these police actions all over the Middle East. We've never been more vulnerable than we are right now, and the federal government's doing nothing to protect our borders. So the reality is there's a potential for an invasion, whether it's Mexico or China or some other force or God forbid, even our own government. We need to be prepared, for the worst case scenario. With our preparedness, we hope to be able to avoid a lot of bloodshed and a lot of bad things. We still haven't exhausted all of our peaceful measures of rectifying things inside this country, but it would be foolish for us not to prepare for the eventuality if we end up failing in our efforts to rectify this by the most peaceful measures possible. It's all about trying to mitigate the amount of bloodshed and damage, that would occur during such a transition. And that's dire important. We do not want to see widespread bloodshed like we did in the first Civil War. We are trying to avoid that by every means possible. But we're not willing to back down. We're not going to take this tyranny. We're going to do everything that we can to restore lawful constitutional governance in this country. And we have to be prepared to face, bigger forces than ours. Our country is seeing a lot of different threats from all different angles, and this is mostly an intellectual conversation about, tactics. We're not calling for any violence. We are not going to be taking the first shots. This is, for if things get so bad that we have to defend ourselves. and defend ourselves against a superior force, and we can only win that through superior tactics. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. We may use a fictitious enemy such as the super robot ninja zombie Nazis, just to fill in the gap. It could be, anybody, anything. Again, we're not calling for violence. We're just preparing. We're all about militia and militia training here. With that being said, I will bow out here and sit back in the producer's chair and fiddle the knobs and dials and see what we can do about having the most productive, smooth show that we can possibly have. It's a privilege to be here, to be on the front lines of preparedness and getting people ready for the worst case. Hopefully, if we're lucky, we can avoid that and we can see areas where we've been failing before. It's all about working together and being prepared. And with that, I will also say the toll-free lines are still down, so the call-in number is still down, unfortunately. We're working on trying to get that rectified. Hopefully we'll get that back in order really soon. So if you want to interact with us, come to the chat room, and go from there. With that, Fox, microphone's all yours. Take care.
Well, thank you, sir. Thanks for helping me out these past few weeks. I really do appreciate you taking care of all the producing and fun stuff. It means a lot to me. Like I said before, I appreciate the opportunity. I know, Smiter, you have a disclaimer for yourself, so I'll let you go ahead and fill everybody in.
Yeah, my first disclaimer is my son is probably going to interject here. Not that he has any philosophies he wants to offer, but he might just have to mute out and queue up another Scooby-Doo movie or something. I'm not really interested in going into the disclaimer because the scenario that we're going to be talking about kind of speaks for itself. So I would encourage people to think in a non-traditional way about problems that may or may not exist. And so, yeah, I don't have any major caveats in that regard other than, open your mind a little bit, and being hyper-aware isn't a bad thing, especially if you're already convinced that your environment's being compromised somehow or threatened. So if we want to go ahead and start with the scenario, we can sure roll right into that, Fox.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, in the future, there has been some form of catastrophic event. Hurricanes and tornadoes and polar shift and hell on earth. And a lot of destruction and people hurt and dead and all of that. And we are now, as Americans, facing foreign occupation by zombie Nazis. So this is the first episode of the Zombie Nazi Survival Guide. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. And Smiter, I'll let you start us off. Go ahead, man.
Okay, yeah, let's stay out of the weeds if we can. And I have notes, which I normally don't, so this will be a lot cooler from my end. But we go back to a foreign presence that's essentially invaded and stood up its own government. That's kind of the critical thing as we move along, because that brings into the equation the resisting population. So naturally, in a resistance like that, you've already chosen that you're not going to roll over and piss on yourself and just give up. You're going to try and resist, if it's not just for the sake of smiting your enemy, as you go down. It's also perhaps part of a larger plan to restore your nation or your government or whatever it was that was taken away from you in this occupation. So citizens are going to form small groups of, we'll refer to them as resistors, but it's important to also be thinking about how this could be an individual person or we probably have heard them in other folklore as lone wolves. But in regards to a guerrilla operation, these are the people that have always been somewhat of force multipliers akin to what special forces would do. They're trained from the lowest level to the highest level of operational capability, meaning they know how to take the right pictures, interpret them, and make a good judgment on how they're going to act to support the whole resistance movement. And asymmetrical warfare is definitely a better nomenclature, I feel, just because it instantly makes you start to entertain asymmetrical. Okay, something that's not square, it's not in the box, there's another dimension to it that we have to think about, and that's just it, is from the guerrilla war fighters' perspective, they're going to be wanting to think about, are they regular Joes? Are they going to work every day? And if so, what is their job? If they're still part of the community or the society that was left in place, it might just be, government positions that are open, and one of the resistors happens to work in that organization. Well, it gives you a unique opportunity because that person may or may not be willing to go 100% into the fight on a resistance, but they'll definitely be useful in other means like data collection or intelligence or whatever. So, like I was saying with the asymmetrical thought, that's a dimension that needs to be added to the thinking of how what can it do to deal with this bad news situation on an organized level, and that was something that we were more used to talking about, say, with the other folklore of militias, traditional groups that have formed organized pockets of resistance, typically for the purpose of, an armed action, but not always. Sometimes these groups are just little hackers that do annoying things to people, as a part of their promoting their cause. But they would never harm a fly or whatever, which is one of the other important things to think about in the asymmetrical resistance continuum is, your most lethal act may not actually be one of violence. Just kind of dwell on that for a moment because it seems pretty axiomatic, I know, but I think that a lot of people feel that just having a closet full of weapons is the solution to, being able to participate in the resistance, and that is one dimension, but it's certainly not the one that we're discussing today. So where do you go? Well, first you got to think about the common goal, because without that, or a goal, all the planning in the world is pretty meaningless. And once again, I know that sounds pretty simple, but it really prevents the spinning of the wheels when it comes to taking any action, because we're assuming that there is desired action once again, because we want to get these bad guys out of our homeland, and we obviously can't just do it by going toe-to-toe with them. That's typically why the guerrilla warfare was introduced, was because you had a oppressed force or a resisted force that was outnumbered and outgunned, and just because you're in that circumstance, it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. I mean, sometimes using your enemy's, most prized asset, say if it's technology, can be undone, because now the way you choose to communicate is through some kind of graffiti art or something, and it's completely out in the open, and nobody has a clue what it means except your little pocket of resistors. So where are we at here? Okay. So what you need is the ability to maintain a persistent and effective resistance to that large force, and through multi-dimensional means. And I have to go back and just kind of underscore the ability to maintain, because if you get hurt, if one of your people gets hurt in all of this resistance effort, that's a big deal. If they get apprehended or killed, that's a big deal too. So once again, I think that caution and prudence needs to go, right up there at item number 3. That's pretty critical to all this, actually having the chance of working if you're organizing a resistance, an asymmetrical environment. It might be worth saying in your planning phase that any casualties are unacceptable, so all of your further mission planning has to be predicated on that. Whereas in a larger scale military operation, that isn't necessarily going to be something that's going to dissuade a planner from choosing a certain order of business over another. So, you want me to keep jabbering here, or do you want to jump in?
Well, I think we're gonna jump into gear first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do that, because I'll just keep talking. You know it.
Yeah, I know that. I see a lot of militia units out there that in their training events and whatever else, all they have really is a plate carrier and a belt with a pistol and extra mags on it, and that's it. And that's what they train to bug out with. That's what they train. That's what they're going to have on when there is open resistance. And got to tell you, it's good to have body armor. I'm not trying to put that down. But you're going to need a little more than just a plate carrier and a pistol belt, because we are not going to be able to go back to base at the end of the day, refit, rearm, and get some hot chow. You need to find a good medium between, this is what I prefer, a good medium between Molly and Alice gear. Have a Molly vest with Alice belt and an Alice pack. Because I know and I understand that when I leave to go do whatever, I need to carry everything I need on my back or on my belt. We're going to get into bivouac and caching and all that stuff later on, but on the onset of whatever situation comes, you're going to need to carry everything you have, and a plate carrier or pistol belt's not going to do it. And before we get a little bit farther, there's one thing I want my listeners to know, something that really kind of pisses me off. Have a dump pouch on your belt. It costs $10. Get one. The troops in Mogadishu, in the Black Hawk Down scenario that everybody knows about, they did get ammo, and they got ammo drops. And when the ammo drops came in the middle of the street, the guys recovered everything, opened up the ammo cans, and realized that everything was in stripper clips and just loose ammo and no mags. And they thought they were hot shit and decided to be sexy about it and do speed reloads. So all of their magazines were scattered all over the streets. They got their ammo. They got refitted. They got their little ammo drop there, but they didn't keep their mags. And that's something, especially guys with AKs, or FALs, or M1A, those odd set rifles, you're not gonna, those aren't common rifles. You're not going to be able to scavenge or find that kind of magazine. So you need to be able to have lots of backup, first of all. Second of all, you need to keep them once they're empty, because you're going to need them again. Plain and simple. But, yeah, what do you have to say about gear there, Smyer?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the additional pouches for stuff like that. Could be for anything, but that's a really good point. I fundamentally never ditch a magazine, never really have. I know that sometimes you have to, but you just got a little pouch there on your side, you know? I mean, a gas mask pouch would work fine too if you didn't want to go spend a lot of money. I know that it's kind of, some people are restricted by their, you know, disposable income to spend on equipment. So you got to really be creative. You know, if it's got the right clips on it for an Alice setup or your load suspension, you know, go for it. If it fits on there and it makes sense and it doesn't, you know, bind up on your sling or, you know, some crazy feature you have on your rifle you didn't think about, and now you're just a fucking mess out there in the field. I prefer vests to the investment of the plate system because I can always throw that vest underneath my regular civilian clothes. And I like to wear my gear in a way that I can peel it off to certain levels. You know, obviously you've got if you got a patrol pack, it doesn't make any sense for you to put something in there or on there that you're going to be uncomfortable with being without for a little while if you need to pick up some speed. I don't know if it's cheating, but I'm one of the guys that'll ditch his patrol pack so I can haul ass. You know, and hopefully everything that I need for that little excursion is going to be firmly mounted within my rig. So that's another thing. I mean, the asymmetrical thinking to how you sensibly approach your rig, it should be light and effective, you know, and it shouldn't be over encumbered with a bunch of shit you never need or the wrong shit. And so if you are one of those people who carries, as you said, you know, the oddball magazines, and don't expect someone to hook you up with one because they can't.
Yeah, you see in the movies, I'm low on ammo, and three people throw them a mag. Well, you got an AK, and I've got a FAL. Sorry, man. Don't know what to tell you. And that, you know, that'll go into standardization with your unit, which we'll touch on later. I don't want to get off track here. But when you said disposable income and people need to pay attention and, you know, watch what they spend and all that, what it comes down to is priority. You need to prioritize. Think about, if I purchase this, will it help in the long run? And one of the biggest things that I see working to aid you in the long run is a dump pouch. If you don't have mags, you have a single shot rifle. It's a $10 investment that will save your ass down the road when something happens.
Yeah, I actually keep 3 open pouches on my rig just for whatever gunny things I might need along the way. I mean, they're flat until needed. They don't really snag on anything.
Yeah. That's the roly-poly pouches.
Yep.
They're very useful. Also, what I've seen for alternatives to dump pouches is, like you said, the gas mask pouch. And for something other than magazines, I think it's Blackhawk that makes them. They're little shotgun pouches that fold out into 3 parts.
If people want to really save some money and they're handy with, you know, thread and all that, you can modify your BDU type pants, you know, the cargo pants, and take out the buttons and everything and just put in like some elastic in there. So it'll always be closed, but it'll be something that's, you know, handy that you can use. Assuming you're going to be wearing such kind of, you know, clothing at any point where it's going to matter. I've modified a lot of my uniforms to work a little bit better for me. You know, obviously everything is what you make it. So I'm surprised there's not some mom and pop USA out there turning out awesome web gear for people. It's all made in China.
Well, with that, it needs to be specific to you. What works for me really won't work for anybody else, or at least it shouldn't. Everybody is personalized in their own way of doing things. You know, the way I practice, mag changes, jam clears, all this other stuff will be completely different. And if you put my vest on, something might snag when you're doing a double feed drill.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So there's no universal thing. What works for me is probably not going to work for you. And Major Cross just put something really awesome in there. Simplicity, efficiency, and practicality is the key. Keep it simple, stupid. Exactly, Randy. Thank you for that. Keep it simple, and it is extremely personalized to you. And one note before we move on, when you are practicing things and you are trying to figure out what gear works best for you, keep your training consistent. Find one way of doing a reload and keep doing that, because if you change it up, you're going to freeze up. And we're going to move on from gear now onto comms. I'm going to have a show next week. I'm going to have Dave on, along with Smother, and we're going to be talking about comms a little more in depth. We're probably going to spend an hour on it. But for right now, I'd like to touch on guerrilla communications. Smiter and I, in personal conversation, talking about things like graffiti. One of the Gorillas in the Mist series, one of the guests was talking about baking a cake with interesting letters on it or coordinates or something. Let's talk a little bit about communications when the big show starts.
Well, you can imagine, say, if your occupational force was, say, the Chinese, and they're pretty good at putting a chokehold on things like the internet, open electronic media, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was ever a risk to the security of your organization through OPSEC, ComSec, then these are things that would most assuredly be at that top of that list again, in the asymmetrical spectrum. And it makes sense too. It's like, all right, it doesn't make sense for me to get on the phone and have a conversation about some great detailed thing that you wouldn't want broadcast to the rest of the world. But what if all of your usual options are not secure? Telephone, no joy there. Internet, no joy. Radios, probably not, unless you had some really awesome, way to encrypt something or, use a system. Well, let's just assume, all that's no good. You're going to be, down to leaving handwritten messages and your own little predetermined language or whatever, and have these little bits of information handed off. Couriers, I think, will be called for as well. I mean, obviously, if you can't pick up the phone and maybe you're too busy to go somewhere and tell somebody something, you'll need to have a trusted courier to do that. And I know that that's something that's been a problem in modern day campaigns for, allied forces, is adjusting or adapting to the fact that the people you're trying to chase down and get the skinny on, you can't, because they're all doing face-to-face meetings and they don't wear uniforms. So how do you prove that? Well, that's a massive burden of surveillance. That's what that is. So yeah, graffiti, I mean, it's everywhere. It's, most people just walk by and don't give it any regard. So.
Right, graffiti or I liked the baking the cake idea. That was pretty good. Now, I was having personal conversation with a few people, and it got a little serious, and somebody said, well, what kind of comms are you going to use when the shit hits the fan? I really don't like that term, but anyways, what kind of comms are you going to be using? I said, courier pigeon, ham radio, CB radio, if available. And everybody kind of laughed off the carrier pigeon.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. We were talking about this, you and me, Smiter. The only predatory issue we'd have there would be hawks or helicopters or planes. But if you send 2 or 3 carrier pigeons, that's bound to work. The only thing is, I don't personally know how to do it. I'd like to learn if there's some kind of way I could do that. But, yeah, graffiti, there's no encryption or any bullshit. Like you just said, nobody pays it mind. Excuse me. Randy, we should approach the subject of dead drops.
That's just for crackheads.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's another good one. It's pretty old school for any kind of espionage, but it works. It's also a good opportunity to take somebody out, but I guess that's perhaps another conversation.
Here's something, I hate to keep going off the path here, but Dave just said, if you have line of sight, comm over laser beams is very workable and is direct, unlike radio. So the only way to intercept would be to break the beam. IR in daylight would go unnoticed. Now, if you wouldn't mind, Dave, I would like to bring that up next week when we talk about comms, because that sounds like something I'd be interested in hearing more about. Yeah, anything else about comms? I don't want to spend too much time on that because of next week. Otherwise, we'll just move on, if that's all right by you, Smiter.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Well, what we're going to talk about here is bivouacs and caches. Stashes, I like to call them. Like I said in the beginning, at the onset, you're going to need to carry everything that you need. Food, water, and ways to purify water. I could go down the list, but you need to carry everything on you. And in most situations, carrying that in the middle of battle, or in a firefight situation, on a mission, anything like that, where you are expecting problems, probably time to set up a stash A. A place where you can ultimately refit and rearm. Someplace that is secure. I'm going to let Smiter take the lead on this one.
Well, now let's back up a minute, I guess, because we're talking about pre-positioning your goodies, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that that's something that should be addressed in the overall plan. You know what I mean? Like in present day reality, there's ready.gov says there's a little punch list of everything that every good citizen should have as a minimum, to help get them through some unforeseen hard time, right? But beyond that, there isn't really much of a sustainability plan. It's just kind of assumed that the man will provide. And then if that's where you want to stop with your plan, well, then that's probably going to lead in a certain direction that you might not like. However, if your plan has like an echelon, if you would, to it, and now that plan involves perhaps a phased withdrawal from an area of uncertainty or an area of discomfort, then perhaps in that plan you should be thinking about, what if I gotta go move out to Uncle Bob's farm and live there? I'll have to learn how to live off the land by growing vegetables and understanding all that shit. Oops, guess what? You're gonna really have to figure out where you're gonna get your hands on the right seeds or whatever, stuff like that. So those are, once again, your broad scoping plan. Of course, now we're talking about what kind of shit should I have in my kit and hanging off my body or whatever. I kind of agree with you as far as everything you need, but I'd say when I put on my rig, I'm putting it on for a reason, not just because it happens to look good or whatever, but it's part of your full battle rattle. And that might not always be appropriate for, whatever kind of activity you're engaged in. If you're just bumping down the street, yeah, you might want to have your vest on and some concealed items or whatever that would address any of your likely confrontations or whatever. I don't know. But, we talked about, as far as the gear goes, don't have anything unnecessary on that equipment, and you shouldn't sound like frickin', reindeer on your rooftop when you put it on. What I mean is, it should be as quiet as possible as well. And, if you need to, take some electrical tape or whatever and make the metal parts so they don't go clink. I don't know. Did I get off in the weeds on that one or what?
Not really. I would like to address a few things.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you have a field mess kit or whatever, you might think about stuffing it with, cotton or, napkins or something, to keep all that gear from making noise.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Was not that exactly, but what I was going to say, if you're going to do that example, stuffing your mess kit with cotton, make sure it's cotton balls or dryer lint or anything like that. Something that has multiple use. You don't fill it up with useless something. Electrical tape to cover up not just the sound but the glare of a carabiner. When a flashlight is drug across you at night, your carabiner doesn't shine back. Electrical tape and duct tape, 100-mile-an-hour tape, priceless out there. And I would like to move on a little bit just because I want to touch on gear just a little bit tonight and do a little more on that next week. Talking about what you need. Basically, what I'm going to say on gear tonight is get what you can while you can, because now we have the time. When you're heading out to Uncle Bob's barn out in the middle of nowhere, worrying about where to get your seeds is it's a little late when you're headed out there. You need to start positioning these caches and bivouacs now. Set up a couple ammo cans up in Uncle Bob's barn, up in the top. Put a couple locks on them. Get some food storage going at different places. Get your community understanding that maybe we need to combine gardens with our neighbors, which is what I'm doing. And instead of my neighbor has a small garden, I have a small garden, well, now we both have one gigantic garden that we could sustain this subdivision off of. Well, not yet, but we will be able to sustain the entire subdivision off of this garden that we're going to get started here pretty soon. If it wasn't constantly raining, I'd love to get into it. But ultimately, I'm getting off into the weeds now. Ultimately, train and prepare when you can, which is right now. And extra socks.
Yeah, wool ones.
What's that?
I said wool socks. I prefer them.
Well, pack as many dry socks as you think you need, and then pack some more. That's something my grandpa told me a while ago. When I was a little kid and going out to Boy Scout camps, he said, "So you think you'll need that many socks? Yeah, huh? Okay, pack a few more." All right. But, yeah, moving on. Like I said, we'll talk more about gear next week with comms. Something that Smider and I have talked about is individual and group operations and the usefulness of the two. We'll start off with individual, or what it's like to be called lone wolf operators. Yeah, go ahead. I'll give you the floor for the beginning of individual operations, Smider. Take it away.
I think we can start by agreeing that there's a definition involved here, and that's that your resistor has to be capable of adapting to what would call like a multi-dimensional battle space. And I know that's starting to maybe sound redundant. I don't know, but there might not be any apparent hostilities. However, the resistors should be constantly adapting and integrating new methods and practices in step with your opposition or your situation. So that's something that applies to either the single or group operators. The difference is that when you have a group, more people can kind of share that burden, which there is quite a bit when you think about it. You need to be able to assess situations. You need to take a lot of information in and make clear-headed decisions based on facts. So that those sources that are available to you, you may have to develop yourself. And that might be something like, I don't know, getting into remote-controlled aircraft and fiddling with cameras so that you can have a look around certain areas. And the lone wolfer, it's all on him, basically. Not really sure what that person would be like, but obviously there's going to be some reason why they're isolated, and I would say that could be something to be considered with caution, because there's also the ever-present danger of infiltration.
Ooh, don't get into that one. We're gonna talk about that one in later on.
Oh, I see. That's too sexy for right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not bad to put up there too.
Well, they could be trapped behind enemy lines in occupied territories, like myself, being stuck in the Soviet Socialist Republic of Illinois. Once you get farther down south, it's a little more friendly, but suburbs, Chicago, that's definitely occupied territory. People like myself are a little farther apart than, say, in Ohio or Montana, where everybody's on the same page. So I think you'll start to see more lone wolfers, air quotes there, lone wolfers in the more urban welfare areas. But that's all I had to really say about that one.
Well, I would say that if we had to go down a punch list of capabilities to either the lone wolfer or the group, then I would say it's going to be not in any particular order, but intelligence, counterintelligence, espionage, assault, sabotage, communications, coordinated disruptions, diversionary tactics, counter-infiltration. Those would be capabilities that the group should have, and I would surmise that not everybody's going to have those little skill sets all under one roof, but, the lone operator, of course.
I'm glad you brought that up. Diversion and all that fun stuff. You don't have to blow things up. You don't have to, as Smiter put it, stab your enemy in the eye with something sharp. You don't have to do that. Rent a moving truck, one of those gigantic U-Haul trucks, and park it in the middle of an intersection. I really can't speak for anywhere else. I know when I lived in a small town in Texas, it really wouldn't matter, but here in Illinois, one intersection will destroy traffic for miles. If you get 2 or 3 intersections blocked, that's diversion. And distraction and drawing them out is something that we also talked about. Parking out in front of some kind of useful infrastructure for the enemy, such as power boxes that say Zombie Nazi Power or something that you know is theirs, and you know that there is some kind of eye on you when you're there. Park in front of it, hang out, test and watch. Wait and watch and see what they send at you. Take notes. Mentally, obviously. Who they send. How quickly they send them. What they send. I mean, it's... You don't have to stab somebody in the eye with something sharp every time. Recon like that is more useful than anything else. Well, more useful than almost anything else. It's a very... very important aspect to asymmetrical warfare, and it's something that is quite underestimated by a lot of people. So,
right, if you can get all your friends together, focused on one thing to develop or to acquire intelligence on, your ability to assemble your real-time tactical picture, so to speak, is going to be pretty awesome, as long as you're not, nothing goes sideways on you while you're gathering information. One other thing I wanted to buzz through here, well, I guess we should kind of talk about that little list that I just threw out there. Counterintelligence, that it's something you develop in your plan as needed, but it should be at least residing somewhere on the page. Intelligence, we talked about that a little bit, and effective intelligence gathering capabilities. Well, you're going to be limited by the people and what your equipment is that you have on hands, and of course, good cameras, good logging devices, or anything like that. GPS, places that you can take fixes on. Coordinates and such, that's very valuable. One sec.
Yeah, you put a GPS locator on a dog collar and watch who responds to that GPS device wandering up to critical infrastructure. There's all kinds of fun sensors and identifiers out there that will identify that kind of radio signature or something like that, and test the waters. Draw them out, see what they got. Yeah, so it looks like Smiter had to mute out. You're not back yet, are you?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yeah, that was actually, wasn't really thinking that asymmetrically about the GPS tracker on a dog collar, but that's pretty brilliant. Espionage is opportunistic sometimes, and it's going to have to be in the plan as well, because it doesn't necessarily play directly into your survivability, but
I'm sorry, I do have to interrupt you. Dave, nobody's using my dog. If somebody tries to use my dog, they will have to deal with me.
Uh-huh.
Keep going, though. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. And assault is pretty much what it sounds like, properly equipped. Your ability of assault is you being properly equipped to conduct organized assaults on, targets, whatever they may be, ultimately poking the bad guy in the eye. Sabotage is kind of pretty much an assault when you think about it, but it's not necessarily going to have any kind of signs that it was an aggressive act. And if you're lucky and you're a good planner, you can conduct your sabotage without drawing a lot of suspicion, so you can live in sabotage again. And I don't know if we talk about communication in the great detail. We don't need to, but critical, reliable, and secure. So yes, it is critical that you have a means to communicate. There's so much gear out there that people that aren't able to cobble together some communication equipment, shame on them. Shame, shame, I say. And I also wanted to mention about the whole political end of what would be, have to be fueling the guerrilla asymmetrical operations, because if it's the group of people that are, going to work every day and they have incomes and everything, great. But if this pocket of resistors lives off in la land, hiding in the fray, someone's going to have to be paying their bills. And presumably there's a political action involved too. So not that we need to go too far into that, but it should be noted that does exist. And if the resistance resides within the population, or they live in pockets located in seclusion, that's going to be a big difference. So, where's Lone Wolfie get his money from? Well, it doesn't really matter, because he operates all by himself, and he's probably really good at taking care of himself too.
Yeah, that is something also that we will have to cover, is masking our operations. One last thing that I wanted to talk about with individual operations. This goes along with disruption, but it's kind of on its own. I believe it was you or Cav Scout, I think it was you, who said, dam the river so their power has to be generated through their generators, which run off of fuel. That takes away from resource. That means that they have to drive in their fuel or unclog the dam. If there is no safe place for these fuel trucks to park, their resource will be hurt immensely without the use of generators. They can't run all their fun little gadgets. They can't keep the lights on at night. The list goes on about what they can't do without without power. And sorry about that. If you take something simple as clogging a dam, which is not that complicated, or clogging a river, damming the river, that's an individual thing, and it goes back to, you don't have to poke somebody in the eye every time you go out. But yeah, if there's nothing else you got on individual operations, I think we should move into group operations right now.
Well, I think that they all kind of intertwine, because the principles apply. They just put that burden for the more effective individual, I guess. Because, going through these skill sets is critical, because it helps to fashion the way of thinking that we should perhaps all be meditating on to some degree or another. Like, think of stealth, and what comes to mind when you say stealth, it's obviously being sneaky. But how do you go about that? You know, sometimes it's a little bit more than just not making any noise. Just not being detected. And that plays into your longevity plan, which hopefully we all have one. And not being detected for certain things is clearly advantageous. If you're applying this into your group defensive plan, you would likely want to be giving yourself as much advance notice that your perimeter is being probed. And probing is a pretty fun little thing to do because you can do it in many ways because you're ultimately just trying to elicit a reaction from your opponent or whatever. So if you want to figure out where the oppressors are camped out at, you might have to go probing around for them. And don't think they won't be doing it for your little guerrilla group either, if they're hunkered down somewhere in the bush. You want to get a little bit of a early warning system in place. And how do you do that? Well, simple tripwires and things like that, and things that make a loud noise. Inconveniently dug pits. They could really jack somebody up if you did them right. And that would be part of your whole defensive plan, because ultimately you're going to want to be able to withdraw to that area to another place. And there's a bit of a flow diagram you could even develop, for this defensive plan if it involved you continually being on the run, which is a shitty way to live, I surmise. But in case your plan involves chasing your tail, you might want to include something like this that gets you to a better place but buys you some time. So dogs are a good, if they haven't been compromised into the collective already and implanted with chips.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to bring up. Exactly to the letter, dogs. I have a Siberian Husky, and the only time I've ever heard her bark was when I was in direct danger. If I'm outside and she hears something or someone, she lets me know, but she doesn't bark. So things like that should be taken into consideration. Huskies will let you know somebody's there by moving and very quietly whining and basically pointing, but without lifting their legs and doing the pointer thing. Even German Shepherds, dogs that are more open about their presence, that bark and they're loud when they hear or see something. Those can be used also. But dogs, just like the carrier pigeon, are dismissed and ignored as real assets.
Well, you shouldn't ignore anything. That's really the spirit of what we're discussing here today. Is
I understand.
asymmetrical thinking. But yeah, there's a lot of animal friends out there that we can employ in our system. Let's talk about strategy, shall we?
Go right ahead.
If your resisting forces have been driven out of their home of operations, or it appears a bug out is in order, like we were talking about, a tiered withdrawal should be conducted to maximize the security of the future operations, right? So this means good recon, pre-positioning. We talked a little bit about that. Communication capabilities, we talked about that a bit. Communication equipment and skills, because that's ultimately whatever it is, the equipment you have and your ability to use it. and acknowledge that the existing radio and telecommunication infrastructure is going to be something that's going to be useful, knowing your limits there. And then your sustainability, we talked about that. If your sustainability plan only goes to the 92-hour point of not having running water and electricity in your home, that's a problem for you. And then you're no good in the guerrilla camp either. So recon, what is that? Well, that's basically knowing a certain area pretty intimately and being able to communicate details about it to other people. Prepositioning, we were talking about caching, or you call it sashaying, or whatever it was.
Stashay.
Yeah. Stashay, yeah, that's good, because it doesn't make sense for you to have to hump all your stuff if you do have to bug out. But I fundamentally don't encourage bugging out right at the first sign of any trouble.
Yeah, I don't think anybody on this site does. Any of the hosts. And, without getting too far off on this, as far as bugging out, it seems, unless there's some kind of nuclear, biological, or chemical threat, leaving a critical area of importance, your community. Put some roadblocks up and guard it. Bug out, exactly. Bug out is a last resort. Secure your area. Don't egress don't retreat or use your route of egress unless you have to. And you can fight, but you cannot shoot gamma rays or gamma particles from a nuke that hit a town, and you're downwind. Stay where you are strong. Exactly, Dave. And the community, I know the OHMM is working very well, as well as CCOM and those fine people down there. Really great groups. They're working on that community that we need. And just bug out is last resort. Plain and simple, that's all there is to it. But yeah, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Well, right. I mean, because fundamentally a bug out is, you've got 5 minutes and you're out of there. So if you know that wherever your next place is better than your house, or wherever you are at the time is more secure, then that makes sense for the bulk of your stash A to be located, right? Or someplace that's easily accessed by your group. If part of your withdrawal plan involves, sustaining the group, then obviously you need to have a few people that are capable of retrieving those things, because something could happen to somebody, and you don't want Bob to be the only one holding the key for your goodies, and oops, Bob got scooped up last night, and so the keys are now somewhere else. Or he was the only one that knew the location, or something silly like that. That's not good for the group. Let's talk a bit about water, because that should go without saying, but I would encourage anybody who's thinking that camping out near bodies of water is going to be an immediate good thing. Well, those will be frequently patrolled as well.
Of course, that's exactly what lions do. They'll hang out by the watering hole, or not just lions, any animal will hang out and basically camp the water hole, because you got to go there for water. So this is, if we're going to talk about purifiers and that kind of thing, I'd like to keep that for next week. So don't go too far into gear, if you don't mind. I'm not trying to be rude here to you. But, yeah, go ahead and finish your thought. Once again, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I hate to keep
It's not a problem. It was just in my notes, so I had to mention it. I want to talk about defense because this is another planning thing, and it should also go into the criteria of capabilities. So planning, rapid response, meaning how quickly can you respond to something that is clearly of an overt threat. If it requires your group to do something like run away, okay, how are you going to do that? If it just requires, only the action of one individual, then what are the expectations from the rest of the group and the integrity of everybody's peace of mind? Early warning, we talked about that in kind of a physical way, but, if you've established that there are certain threats, what's your early warning system going to be? Chances are somebody's going to find out something and feel the need to communicate that to more people. And that can go back into our asymmetrical communications mode is, what's a good way to be able to spam everybody, so to speak. When you're out in the bush, I would definitely encourage the maximum range possible to be achieved when you're setting up like a perimeter for your safety zone. I mean, obviously, you're going to be limited on how much ground you can cover in a reasonable amount of time, but, now's the time for people to think if they really need that sport bike in their garage and they might want to trade it in for a dual sport or a dirt bike. Because now you've just extended the range of your group quite a bit for doing a little bit of recon if need be.
Well, a flare can be seen for miles.
Yeah, it can if you're looking for it.
Right, so go as far out as you can, reasonably, being reasonably safe with that, and set up a few tripwires so you know when somebody's coming. Miles away, you know when somebody's coming.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of little off-the-shelf things that you can buy today, and they have pretty good shelf life, and they make all sorts of noise and light if you want to. Those types of things can be improvised too if you had to. If you needed a noisemaker when something crossed a certain line, that's awesome. Or if maybe you had enough time to stretch wire that far, you could have some electrical means to signal you. Even maybe some remotely wireless activated cameras and sensors. There's plenty of stuff off the shelf today if people were thinking about it.
Well, a wireless security camera with a little monitor and two cameras, I think it's $50 or so, and that can be run off of a solar panel that you can get for $50.
Yeah, I could. I tell you, I find the range on those things being kind of not very useful for what we're talking about. But they could be modified if somebody had the means to do it.
Right. Well, the range, I mean, if you're talking about, this is down the line, and I did kind of jump off the path here. Put a couple above, in a tree above your hidey hole or your spider hole, and have that little solar panel sitting above, out, obviously collecting sun, and have that monitor inside with you. And this is getting a little too far into infrastructure. I want to stop here. But yeah, there's options right now, and if you're on a fixed budget or however you want to say, just prioritize and get what you need that will sustain you long term. Just prioritize as best as you can, and we have the time now to be training and to be collecting these things and getting what we need. You can improvise smoke cover. You can make your own smoke bombs. Obviously, check with your local laws and statutes, whatever else about making fun things like that. But mine your backyard with cow pies. That'll annoy them and probably slow them down. There you go, Dave. That's for you. Yeah, back on track. I apologize. Dave keeps bringing me off track and slowing me down.
Don't blame it on Dave.
It's all Dave's fault. I promise you.
All right, so let's burn through this again in our scenario, because when we started talking about apocalyptic events, it's not hard to imagine what a series of strains on your infrastructure could do. Like, if you did have a bunch of hurricanes and earthquakes that kind of inundated your emergency response systems, and it could possibly take its toll on you. That would be a great time to be invaded by another country.
Exactly.
Let's just say China says, you know what, we're done with you guys. You owe us too much money, and so we're just going to come in and take everything. We're foreclosing on you guys, but we're going to keep your way of government in place, even the shit you don't like. So there's your justification, for resistance. But now's the time to start thinking about, how do you become the quintessential, do-it-all warrior, if you would, without compromising your position in life, assuming you still have a job or something that you care about. You can't just be running off half-cocked without any intent, And it's best, if you're going to strike, to do so with a lot of meditation ahead of time, make it valuable. I would just venture to go into risk management, so to speak. So not everybody really thinks about things. They get excited about one particular indignity, and they just want to go blow something up, and that perhaps might be the worst thing that could possibly be done. But since you didn't think about it until after the fact, it wasn't considered.
I hate to do this. I had to take a step back. I know that California imports 2/3 of its oil or energy, be it natural gas or oil, from Texas. And all it takes is to somehow disrupt their food or energy, which could be as simple as destroying a couple highways. And that would create not an apocalyptic event, but it would stir a hornet's nest. Or something as simple as nobody is getting their checks cut anymore, their welfare checks. It's the infrastructure right now is just so easy to be disrupted and possibly destroyed by something as simple as a few tornadoes. If we destroy trucking routes, this country is going to come to a grinding halt. So this is something that needs to be understood, that it's too easy to ruin, to bring about disorder, and which is why we need to prepare now. But yeah, I had to put that in there. I do apologize again.
Well, I think it's all good food for thought. If some force did choke off a supply line like that, it's worth mentioning, you know, especially if you're on either side of those points, you would be very interested in making it stop. You know, if you're California wanting your energy, I think you might find Californians a little more willing to go to arms over the menace that's choking off their natural gas and oil or whatever they desperately need. I'm assuming it's electricity ultimately, and petrol for automobiles. How do you plan to thwart something like that? You know, you can't just go toe to toe with it. Once again, people need to be communicating the details, and coordinating and combining their efforts, right?
Right. Well, right now we have the time to plan and prepare for things like this, but we don't have too much time. So Dave constantly says the best time for this kind of preparation was 20 years ago. Second best time is today. Do a little bit every day. Every time you go out and go grocery shopping, buy a bag of rice and beans and put it in the back of the pantry that you'll never touch. Just a little bit at a time. But we are running out of time. Gas prices here jumped up 35 cents overnight. I'm now paying $4.60 for gas. Awesome. Food prices are rising, not as... Alrighty. Alright, interesting. You know, food isn't rising as quickly as gas, you know, but we need to prepare now. Smiders, what's going on over there, man?
I don't know. I thought maybe we were breaking up there a little bit or something. Yeah, what I wanted to do is kind of go back through stuff we had talked about and do that with a clear head here. So, one sec.
Okay. One thing that I had been wanting to mention for a little while now was we need to attain a tactical mindset and a way of situational awareness. And we need to have that constantly. That was talked about in the Gorillas in the Midst series. You need to constantly be thinking about, let's just say, a route of egress. If something bad were to happen. If Nazi zombies decided to start marching down the street. Think constantly about how to better yourself in a tactical mindset. If I'm not sure I'm making too much sense here.
You're actually spot on. Yeah, I mean, situational awareness is, I guess you could reduce everything to its lowest common denominator. You know, does it mean you need to do anything? No, but you know, being able to look at all the dimensions of your life and see how that plays in to the big picture is pretty important. You know, simply said, what we're talking about is, you know, hypothetical on one hand and then real on the other. When you think about how it requires some planning and thinking that a lot of people don't have. Of course, you got to be able to be aware of the problem to start forming a defense. But, you know, this is a slow process for everybody.
Yeah. It just all comes down to we need to prepare now. And you need to constantly be thinking tactically, I guess. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it is now. Prepare. It's a lifestyle. It's not a hobby. When you say that you're part of a militia unit, or that you are part of a civil defense, whatever you call yourself, by placing that title behind your name, you are saying that I am prepared to go to war. That's what the militia is for, plain and simple. And if you are not going to wake up on a Saturday morning to go train because it's raining outside, just don't come back. We need soldiers. We need people who are serious about this. Don't join a militia and tout that you're a militia and put bumper stickers and do all these things, and you're not even going to go train. You are a Sunshine Patriot, and I hope that posterity will forget that I ever called you countrymen. Forgive me. Sorry about that.
Well, pretty hardcore, dude.
Yeah, I didn't mean to go off on a rant there. So let's get back on track here with the show. Any more comments on group operations? Anything like that? We should move on also.
Well, we talked about our scenario, and it's important for us to go back to that because it represents our resisting population and what we're talking about here. I also did say that part of this planning would be a coup. So essentially, your goal is to get your people into power. Somehow, that's got to be done through various forces and other measures, which is really what underscores our conversation.
Wait, what's that sound?
Yeah, they're... sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, we had to go back to that because everything else we were talking about as far as the operational capabilities are predicated on that thought. You know, yeah, we were talking about being tactically minded with everything, but your capability and desire to be adaptable to that multidimensional battle space is how you get there. Adaptability, because chances are things have changed in such a way that you're not really comfortable anymore, or you can't pretend that you are, in the case of some people that may just be coming online or whatever. And that, there might not be any apparent hostilities, but the resistors should be constantly adapting and integrating their new methods that they're coming up with that work. If you resigned yourself, as this asymmetrical force that you're not just going to get stepped on, so every time something pisses you off, you're going to take some kind of action against it, then awesome. But just let those actions not be ones that get you thrown into the deepest, darkest hole on your first go around, because that's just kind of silly. You didn't really achieve much there, did you? So prudence. Critical thinking. I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but your critical thinking skills, if you focus them on opportunistic strikes, for example, and you would be surprised if you just spent your day thinking about ways that you could do something devious to fight back at these evil forces. I bet you'd come up with more than you could even imagine. But you got to be looking for it.
Well, I was breaking up pretty bad, so
I'm sorry.
I missed a bunch of that. Yeah, let's cover masking the operations of group and individual. Getting kind of a broad coverage of the subject of masking operations. I know you mentioned having a cover business as a way of income for things like food, not to mention magazines, ammo, critical things that your group is going to need or you will need as an individual. If you're not working, which many people won't when a situation like this arises, you're going to need to make cash, so you can rent that U-Haul truck and park it in the middle of a intersection, along with the two other guys who also rented those trucks, and you need cash. Doesn't matter if you're individual or group operation. It doesn't matter how much ammo and food and water you have stashed away, you need more. You're going to run out. I don't care how much you have. And what you cannot attain, or what you cannot obtain, you will need to purchase, either through trade, barter, or cash. So, what's a couple ideas that you had for masking the operations, like a cover business and things. I'll let you have the floor. I'll quit rambling on here.
Oh, that's no problem. Delay here. See if I can fix that.
Yeah, Dave is, I guess, the producer's.
Let's see. I don't know. Dave. But it is kind of weird to hear your voice come back at you, so I'm just going to turn that volume down. Pretty innocuous things can be done to slow the big machines down, but you got to know where all the components are. Like, for example, driving down the road and maybe just taking notes of all the cameras that are mounted here and there, and that's the extent of that person's duties. It doesn't involve them exposing themselves, it doesn't involve them getting in trouble, but they hand that off to somebody who's actually going to use that as value for some other portion of planning. So it's important to be thinking about how you can develop relationships with people and all this too. It adds a new dimension on, having an unfriendly attitude to your fellow man, or you might just be a stranger out there. You might find out they're a bus driver or something and they're on your side, although they're not really willing to go into combat or anything. That's fine.
Well, that's what's makes the militia at large such a dynamic force, is that we have a use for everyone. Auto mechanics, warehouse workers, truck drivers, bus drivers, you name it. We need you. Regular militaries have people trained by necessity to fix the Humvee, and that's your only job for 4 years, and you come to hate your job. And I'm not, speaking for everybody, obviously, because some people love what they do, but what makes us dynamic is we love what we do in most cases, and when we are in our field of expertise, such as mechanics, we know as much about it as we can, because that's how we make our living. We depend on these things. So we are knowledgeable about these things, and everybody has a use. I know I keep saying that. I'm a broken record here. Such a warehouse worker has a place to stock or hide away fun stuff for the group. bus drivers know what they know. You know. Sorry, folks. I'm going to let Smiter keep going on that one.
Well, I used the bus driver example just because there's somebody that is almost in a position of trust, but not really. But, you know, they see things, they know people. They might even be somebody who's useful in your communication plan if you had to go that route. And it's not something that people really think about, you know. Maybe if I make friends with a bus driver, they would be a good candidate for your resistance group. And I mentioned positions of trust because that's also another important thing to be thinking about in the asymmetrical process. Is there anybody in your group who is in a position of trust? And by that I mean it could be anything between, you know, a municipal position to a police officer or even, you know, a council member or something like that. Because I would not only consider them high value, but I would also consider them also potential, you know, infiltration points, I guess, either way. You know, I guess you'd have to look in the case of, you know, someone who's casting votes or whatever, you know, how they tend to vote or something. I think it would just be a headache. But your end goal is also, you know, a government restoration, so perhaps that is where you start there. I don't think this is what we're talking about today, but the people that you are romancing, so to speak, or working with, you know, should be people of purpose other than the ones that you're just protecting.
Well, let's, yeah, I think we're getting a little too far into the weeds again. That's, yeah, that's something we need to touch on later. Still useful. I'm not trying to say that what you're saying is not to the point at all, but we're in the last half hour here, so everybody knows that the federal government, any government, will use infiltration, and I don't need to tell anybody that they are using it now. Well, play it back. Get somebody into the zombie Nazi police military task force as a recruit and feed them bullshit. Thank you, Dave. Counterintelligence. That's a prime example of counterintelligence. Get in there and say, I used to be part of so-and-so's group. Here's whatever. Their FOB is over here. This is a cave, and they run missions out of here. And, well, that cave is booby-trapped.
That's a good one.
Yeah. It's just play the infiltration game back with them. It's simple. Because when something like this happens, it's not going to be as most people perceive it. There will be some sort of society still operating. I see it happening as much like what's happening in Iraq. People still have their jobs, and people are still going to and from work and hanging out. Everybody's still driving their car. Not everybody. People are still driving their cars. The only difference now is on your way to work, there's a striker passing you on the left. There's still going to be a society, and what will happen when this comes down is the only jobs available will be government jobs. So use every opportunity you can to infiltrate, get a government job, and feed them bullshit. Counterintelligence every time. You don't even have to be in a governmental on the government payroll, or on the zombie Nazi payroll, forgive me. Call in the tip line, because you know there's going to be bounties for people such as us. There's on the Red Dawn 2010 website, little thing you could put your face in, a little alert poster. Contact your local officers for a reward of extra credits or something like that. You know that's going to happen. Call them up. Give them bullshit. Give them fake intelligence. I keep repeating myself here. So,
I think it's brilliant. You could stage anything well enough that it could be sucked into the great intel machines out there. You feed enough into it, analysts tend to form pictures, and those pictures are what the planners usually have their decisions resided on.
Daddy, when's Mom gonna be here?
well, yeah. For the last 23 minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit, get into recon, and talk a little bit more, and we touched on that earlier in the show, and I kind of strayed away from that. I'd like to cover the rest of the evening with recon.
Well, so we talked about recon, reconnoitering, right? What that really is, isn't any single one thing, because sometimes, it could be a specific task. You just need to go verify the color of something or the location of something. Sometimes that only takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it could take you 5 days to do that. And there's equipment issues here, but let's not stop on those. There's also the kind of recon that might require a person or a few people to hunker down for a while. You may need to observe a certain area over a few days period to determine something that's valuable to you. So you either need to put somebody out there or some kind of device that can give you real-time monitoring. And the great thing about recon is that it's typically conducted in a way that is, surreptitious or stealthy. So you're trying to observe something without being observed. It's not always necessary, but my guess is in the instance that we're discussing, it might be the case. You might be out reconning or, observing an area to see if it's a viable place for you to use as a safe zone for your group. And there's certain things you're going to look for, of course. What's the terrain like? Is there any food that grows there? Is there any water? What's the cover? What's the concealment like? Any good choke points that you can set up, so if the bad guys roll through there, you can force them into a kill zone. That's stuff that if you were going to send people out to do recon, you might give them a punch list of things to look for.
Yeah, this is why we need experienced people. I was just earlier today was watching a video. I'm not going to get into any specifics, but this person had no idea what they were doing, and their group was at a loss because they have no people in their group qualified to be trainers. If you have somebody in your group who's only been in a firefight on Call of Duty on the Xbox, you need to understand that that is not a qualification. They should not be training you. You need somebody who's actually been in a firefight, who has had to come across these same things, such as recon, a punch list. If you have somebody who ran recon in the battlefield, or on the battlefield, then you will know what to look for. They will give you a list of what to look for, what to do, what to come back with. You cannot count on Call of Duty to train you to become a trainer for a militia unit. Once again, the militia is here to protect this country through the use of coercive force. Plain and simple. If you have claimed yourself to be a militia member of a militia unit, you need to understand that you are making a promise to your fellow man and woman that you will protect them by any means necessary. Coercive force can be psychological as well as physical. Thank you, Dave. That is a good point. So before I get off into an angry rant again, let's keep going on recon. Smiter, sorry about that.
No worries. I think training's very critical, and the ability to train starts with your ability to have a training program or a plan. So that means that you've established some minimum amount of skills that people should have to be part of your group. I guess that's what you're saying.
Daddy, what's that watering sound?
I don't know what it is, but don't interrupt me again, okay? So somebody needs to step to the plate and establish themselves as the trainer. They may not be subject matter experts, but they should at least put an effort into assembling the list of those skills that people think they need, or they might just be skills for their job if you want to disseminate jobs in such a way. So your list of duties, and sometimes you can figure things out open source, but a lot of times, you need to have somebody who's been there and done that leading the training or the academics, because if your exposure to certain things is completely fictitious, then you can expect the output of your training to be about the same.
Yeah, a couple more things on training. Major Cross said there is no substitute for actual experience.
No,
and
it's not. I'm not actually in the chat room, so I'm not seeing all that.
Yeah, I've been monitoring and bringing up a few points all night. Recruits can train, but trainers should be experienced and knowledgeable. Exactly. That's just the point that I brought up here. If you are number one on Call of Duty, I don't care. You're not my trainer. Being good at a video game, being good at paintballing or airsoft, that means literally almost nothing. You will sit in your room and read Army Manual, FM, whatever. That doesn't qualify you as a trainer either. Now, on the manuals, you and Randy, and also Cat Scout in his episode, talked about if you train to the manual, we will basically be fighting them toe-to-toe, using their tactics against them. They have the resources, they have the men, and we will lose if we fight to the manual. Plain and simple. Now, that's not to say that the manuals should not be studied. So obtain a zombie Nazi manual and study them. And you can learn how they will react, and you can make them react the way you want them to. Draw them out. Bring them into an area that is booby-trapped. If you study your enemy, you will know your enemy. That's all I'm going to say on that. I'm not going to get off into this.
Well, I think there's a lot of good stuff in those manuals, and for the same reasons that you mentioned. One of the things with recon is also speed and mobility, because you have to think about when you're tasking someone to do something that could potentially get them nabbed, and they're only, they're not going to be carrying full battle rattle, but if they are, that's something to think about. How do you get them out of there? What's their egress plan? These are probably some pretty specialized people that you don't want to just give up. You don't want to just give anybody up, but they need to be protected.
Right. Well, I think, I think we did a good show tonight. I think we're going to get ready to close this out. Dave, if you're still, if you're not breaking up too bad, you can come on and plug anything else. For you militia members out there, and committees of safety, the book by Joseph P. Martino, Resistance to Tyranny, is, both Randy and myself agreed, required reading. And should be mandatory for every committee of safety library out there. So you can go to Amazon and get it for $15 or something. It's a good book. It will help. Yeah, we're going to get Dave on here in a second if connection isn't too bad. I know he's experiencing some horrible weather right now.
Yeah, that's the problem living in the south near Tornado Alley this time of year. We get a lot of bad weather through here. Again, tomorrow we have Sleepy Salsa on. We'll be talking about division. Monday, Doc's coming back for another edition of Militia Medic. Definitely don't want to miss that. And we also have a Cinco de Mayo special with Rock Dog coming up on the 5th. So that's really about all I've got. It was a great show, guys. I've enjoyed sitting here listening to it. My audio feed's been mostly stable the entire time. Thankfully, it tends to work on receive better than transmit, and I'm kind of in a lull spot on the storm right now, so I figured I would definitely jump in. These are definitely good topics to be thinking about. It's all about preparedness. If we're prepared for whatever eventuality might happen, we will certainly be a lot stronger and a lot better off. And if we're prepared enough and we're strong enough, it might serve as its own deterrent.
Exactly. He who wants peace must prepare for war. Plain and simple. As long as we have 187 million gun owners, I don't see what who could possibly think about standing against us. Any kind of open occupation would last, 2 or 3 hours? With 187 million gun owners? Yeah. But,
yeah, we sure hope that's the scenario, the way it would play out.
Well, to be respectful here, that's not what's going to happen. Open occupation, that's not how it's going to be. It's going to be turning the heat up on the stove slowly until we're boiling. They're going to bleed us out slowly, just like they always have. Randy says, not just Randy, everybody has heard the term, one thing we learn from history is that nobody learns from history.
Yeah.
Well, the government has. Excuse me. Not just the federal government here, but governments around the world. The zombie Nazi government has learned from history, and they know how to quell any resistance, armed or otherwise. They know what works, what doesn't work, and they have used these things effectively against their people. they know, they've learned. And we need to know and learn from history as well. And if one thing that we learn from history is that you cannot stand toe-to-toe with a technologically advanced enemy. It won't work. You will get wiped 9 times out of 10. And that's it. And I'm ranting again, going off the trail here.
Oh, it's all relevant, man. I think that, if the adversary's big club in their closet is technology, then you just take that away from them through either some kind of countermeasures or just denying them access to it or don't use it.
Right.
We could talk like another 2 hours about countermeasures to weapon systems, but it's doable. It's no more in advance than the people who made the machines themselves, and those are just people. So maybe science, but it's not rocket science. Well, sometimes it is, but it's not quantum physics, and we'll put it that way.
It's not rocket surgery either.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna close us off for the night. Real great show. I really appreciate having you on, Smiter, and tune in next week for what we're gonna be talking about is comms. I'm gonna have Dave and Smiter on. We're going to be talking about gear for different situations but yeah, we're going to be talking about gear for different situations. What you need when you need it. And preparations that we can take now. Things that need to get done before something bad happens. Preparations that could be made to prevent something bad from happening, such as zombie Nazi occupation. But for the night, I'm going to take us out. Smiter, is there anything else you got to say?
No, God bless America.
Oh, so patriotic.
Stay awake and help people wake up.
There you go. All right, folks. Remember, we need to prepare now because we're running out of time. Stay frosty, everybody. Catch you next week.